Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Let me ask you something deeply personal. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m., with no loud sound, no bad dream, no pain, just wide awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling in complete stillness? And in that moment, did you ever wonder, what's going on with my body? Why now? Is this normal or is something wrong? If these questions have ever crossed your mind, you're not alone. Waking up at 3 a.m. is surprisingly common among older adults. And no, it's not just a random quirk of aging or a bad habit you picked up along the way. In this video, we're going to explore 5 powerful reasons why people tend to wake up around 3 a.m. as they grow older. But more than that, we'll uncover what those wake-ups might actually be trying to tell you about your body, your health, your habits, and even your heart. You'll meet real people, like Harold, who blamed himself for being awake so early until he discovered the role of melatonin, and Gloria, who realized her 3 a.m. wake-ups were really her heart asking to be heard. Each story we share will peel back a new layer of understanding. And maybe, just maybe, you'll come to see those early wake-ups not as interruptions, but as quiet invitations to listen more closely to your body's rhythm. So if you've ever felt lost in the stillness of the night, wondering what's happening inside you, stay with me. What you learn here might just change the way you see sleep and the way you care for yourself forever. Let's begin. In a small town nestled against the woods in Oregon lives a man named Robert, age 74. He's lived alone ever since his wife passed 4 years ago. Every night, he keeps to a quiet, gentle routine. Chamomile tea at 8, a few pages of an old paperback, then lights out by 9. But lately, something's changed. Robert finds himself waking up like clockwork at 3 a.m., not startled, not anxious, just fully awake, and he doesn't know why. He lies in the dark, listening to the quiet, trying to fall back asleep, but the sleep doesn't come. What does come, instead, is a foggy weariness that creeps into his mornings. His breakfast no longer tastes the same. His afternoon walks no longer bring the same joy. He isn't exhausted, but he isn't himself either. The worst part? He starts to doubt his own body. He wonders, is this the beginning of something worse? Am I losing control? But what Robert doesn't know, what so many others don't know, is that his 3 a.m. wake-ups are not a failure. They are not a malfunction. They are messages. You see, early morning awakenings are so common in aging that sleep researchers even have a name for it. But beyond the science, there's something deeper, a quiet emotional toll that comes from waking when the world is still and silent. In that silence, self-doubt grows louder. Robert once slept like a log. Thunderstorms couldn't wake him. But now, the faintest creak of the hallway, a bit of light through the curtain, it's enough to open his eyes. Sleep, once effortless, now feels fragile, unpredictable. And in the dark, questions rise. Am I broken? Or is this normal and no one told me? The truth is, his body is not breaking down. It's simply changing, responding to a combination of natural shifts in biology, habits, and emotional life. And once you understand those changes, you can stop fighting yourself and start caring for yourself wisely and gently. In the next chapters, you'll meet people like Robert who've learned to stop blaming themselves and instead began listening. People who made small, graceful adjustments, not because they were weak, but because they were wise. And maybe you'll find your own story reflected in theirs. Continuation melatonin. The first message from within. In Charlotte, North Carolina, a woman named Linda, 69 years old and recently retired from decades of night shifts as a nurse, noticed something she hadn't expected in her new chapter life. She kept waking up around 3 a.m. There was no panic, no noise, no dreams, just her eyes slowly opening in the darkness, fully awake. Linda was no stranger to sleep deprivation. She'd pulled more overnight hospital shifts than she could count. But this felt different. There was no reason, no stress, just stillness, and the steady return of wakefulness night after night. She began to worry, quietly. Was something wrong? She tried the usual things, reading before bed, avoiding screens, cutting back on caffeine. But nothing seemed to work. Each morning, She found herself watching the clock at 3:10, 3:17, 3:23, until, during a routine doctor's visit, her physician asked a simple question. Have you ever heard of melatonin? Melatonin, the body's natural sleep hormone, the signal from the brain that says, it's time to rest. What Linda learned next changed everything. As we age, melatonin production declines. By the time someone reaches their 60s or 70s, they may be producing only a fraction of the melatonin they once had in their 20s. Melatonin doesn't just help us fall asleep. It helps us stay asleep. And around 3 a.m., like clockwork, melatonin levels naturally drop even further. For someone like Linda, who was already producing less of it due to age, that dip was enough to gently nudge her out of sleep. Not with force, not with fear, just a gentle shift from rest to wakefulness. She wasn't broken. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Her body was simply doing what aging bodies do, adjusting to a new rhythm quietly, subtly, and that changed everything. Instead of blaming herself or fearing the worst, Linda started supporting her body signals. She made her bedroom darker, blocking out even the tiniest glow from her digital clock. She avoided screens for an hour before bed. She added a soft, 15-minute evening walk to help reinforce her natural circadian rhythm. And while she still woke up early from time to time, she no longer felt helpless. She stopped thinking, why is this happening to me? And started asking, what is my body telling me tonight? Some nights, she still opens her eyes at 3 a.m. But now, instead of frustration, there's understanding, compassion, and more often than not, that's enough to ease her gently back into sleep. Linda's story shows us something powerful. Awareness is a form of healing. When you understand why your body behaves a certain way, it becomes less a threat and more of a partner. And in that partnership, sleep becomes less a battlefield and more of a conversation. Continuation, a shifted clock, not a broken one. Far up in a quiet town by the lakes of Minnesota, a retired history teacher named Frank, age 71, found himself puzzled by a new pattern. He, the man his students once jokingly called Mr. Clockwork for his precision and discipline, was now waking up long before sunrise. Around 3 a.m., his eyes would open, not because of a dream or pain or worry, just a clear, quiet sense that the night was over. Frank wasn't upset, but he was confused. He was healthy. He wasn't anxious. He'd gone to bed at a reasonable hour. Why, then, did he keep waking up so early every single night? He thought of insomnia at first, but it didn't feel like insomnia. It felt like his body was just on a different schedule. That's when a sleep specialist introduced him to a phrase he'd never heard before. Advanced sleep phase syndrome. It's a natural phenomenon that occurs in many older adults, where the body's internal clock, the circadian rhythm, starts shifting earlier. You begin feeling sleepy sooner in the evening, often without realizing it. And then, naturally, you wake up earlier too, sometimes before dawn, even if you've had a full night's rest. Frank realized he'd been nodding off during evening news, sometimes as early as 8:30. By 9, he was in bed. By 3 a.m., his body had already completed its cycle. It was simply ready. At first, that realization didn't feel like comfort. It felt like dissonance. His internal rhythm no longer matched the rhythm of his home, or his wife, or the world outside. But slowly, Frank began to see it differently. Not as a flaw, but as an adjustment, a reset of the inner clock. Instead of fighting it, he began to gently guide it. He started adding small rituals to his evenings, taking a slow stroll after dinner, reading by warm light, sharing quiet conversations with his daughter over the phone. Each of these things, small as they seemed, became signals to his body. It's not time to sleep just yet. And over time, those cues helped shift his bedtime a little later, which meant his wake-up time moved closer to morning. The early hours no longer felt lonely or misplaced. They became part of a rhythm, his rhythm. Frank's story reminds us that the body isn't always following the world's clock. Sometimes, it's following a clock that's been ticking softly inside us for decades, one that slowly moves forward, not backward, as we age. And once we understand that, we stop asking what's wrong with me and begin asking instead, what's different now, and how can I adjust with grace? Because sleep, like life, is never fixed. It moves, it shifts, and when we shift with it, not against it, we find peace where there used to be frustration. Continuation, when the body whispers at 3 a.m. In a quiet Vermont suburb, Marjorie, 76 years old, a retired bridal seamstress, lives with her gray tabby cat, Dusty. Her evenings are peaceful. A cup of peppermint tea, a soft blanket, and the familiar hush of her modest apartment. But despite her gentle routine, Marjorie found herself waking up most nights at exactly 3 a.m. At first, she shrugged it off. Then she started noticing. No dreams, no noise, no fear, just her eyes fluttering open into the dark, as if summoned by something she couldn't name. She would lie still, careful not to move too much. But soon enough, she'd begin to feel it. A quiet ache in her knees, the kind that doesn't scream but whispers. And then the familiar pressure in her bladder. Marjorie would get up slowly, walk to the bathroom, and return to bed. But by then, her body had shifted from deep rest to quiet alertness. She couldn't always fall back asleep. And so, her mornings began earlier and earlier. The hours felt longer. Her energy dipped. And something deeper than tiredness began to set in, a quiet frustration. At her next checkup, her doctor listened carefully. "You're not broken," he said kindly. "Your body's simply talking to you in subtle ways. As we age, our bodies change, not dramatically but gently. Joint pain, even when mild, becomes harder to ignore after hours in one position. The bladder loses elasticity, making nighttime bathroom trips more urgent. And medications, especially for blood pressure or heart health, can carry side effects like increased urination or temperature shifts that silently interrupt sleep. None of these things scream for attention, but together they form a pattern, a gentle nudge that brings us out of sleep without fully waking us, until it happens enough times to become noticeable. Marjorie, for example, was taking a mild diuretic in the late afternoon. She didn't know it was contributing to her 3 a.m. wake-ups. But once she learned that, she made small, intentional changes with her doctor's guidance. She adjusted the timing of her medication. She added a soft pillow between her knees to relieve pressure. She warmed the bedroom slightly. She stopped drinking fluids after 7 p.m. And perhaps most importantly, she stopped blaming herself. When she did wake up, she no longer panicked. Sometimes, she simply took a few deep breaths, adjusted her position, and allowed her body the chance to rest again, without pressure or punishment. Not every night was perfect, but her nights were no longer ruled by confusion. They were filled, instead, with gentle awareness. You see, our bodies don't betray us as we grow older. They communicate differently. And when we stop demanding silence and start listening to the whispers, we discover that most problems are not signs of decay, but invitations to care more thoughtfully. Waking up at 3 a.m. may feel like an inconvenience, but sometimes it's simply your body saying, "I need a little help here. Just a small shift, just a bit more grace." And when we respond with kindness, not fear, we build a bridge back to rest. Continuation, when quiet days lead to early mornings. In the rolling countryside of Northern California, Samuel, age 70, had finally settled into the peaceful retirement he dreamed of. No early alarms, no noisy machines, no business to run. Just a small plot of land, his vegetable garden, and the slow rhythm of sunrises and chickens. Life had become calm, maybe too calm. Samuel started eating dinner around 5 p.m., earlier than he used to, because, well, there was no reason to wait. After dinner, he'd watch a documentary, pet his dog, and wind down quietly. The house grew still long before the night truly began. Without noticing, his bedtime crept earlier and earlier, sometimes even before 8:30 p.m. And with that came the 3 a.m. awakenings. At first, Samuel thought he was just getting older. "Old men wake early," he'd mutter. But the early mornings didn't feel good. They felt empty, like his internal rhythm no longer matched the world around him. It wasn't until a conversation with an old friend, now a sleep coach, that Samuel began to see the hidden pattern. You're not just waking early, his friend said. You're sending your body messages. Messages that say, the day ends at sunset. And it clicked. Samuel had unintentionally shifted his entire circadian rhythm. His quiet evenings, early meals, and lack of evening activity were teaching his body to prepare for sleep much earlier, and to wake up earlier too. Our bodies don't run on clocks and calendars. They respond to cues: light, movement, meals, conversation, stimulation. And when those cues disappear too soon, the body adjusts. It sleeps earlier. It finishes resting sooner. And suddenly, 3 a.m. becomes a new morning. Samuel decided to gently reset his rhythm, not by force, but with care. He pushed dinner back by 1 hour. He took short, slow walks just before sunset. He added a little brightness to his evenings, reading under a warm light, playing old records, and even chatting on the phone with his granddaughter. Nothing drastic, just signs to his brain that the day wasn't over yet. The results? His bedtime moved naturally to 9:30 or 10. His body started waking around 5, not 3. And those quiet, lonely early mornings, they became calm, ordinary mornings again. Samuel didn't need medication. He didn't need sleep hacks or heavy routines. He just needed to recalibrate the signals his body was receiving. Because sometimes it's not anxiety or illness keeping us awake. It's routine, subtle shifts in the way we live our days, echoing into the night. And when we pay attention, not with judgment, but with curiosity, we can guide our bodies gently back to balance. Because your body isn't confused. It's responding faithfully, honestly, to what you show it each day. And that can be changed. Continuation, when the mind won't sleep, even if the body does. In a small third-floor apartment overlooking a quiet park in Denver, Gloria, age 80, lives alone now. Once a piano teacher, a mother of 3, a wife of 52 years. She is still all those things, in some ways. But her days are slower now, her home quieter, her routine softer, and her nights more awake than ever. It started gently. A soft stirring around 3 a.m., sometimes earlier. No pain, no urgency, just a feeling, a hollow kind of awareness. At first, Gloria thought nothing of it. Then, slowly, she began to notice a pattern, not just in her body, but in her heart. Lying there, with the room hushed and her memories louder than usual, she'd find herself thinking about her late husband, how he used to read next to her in bed, the way he'd laugh at her off-key singing. She remembered the piano lessons she used to give, the noise, the motion, the purpose. Now, in the silence of 3 a.m., something stirred. Not fear, not sadness exactly, but a longing, a quiet ache for connection, for presence, for something meaningful to hold in the stillness. It wasn't insomnia. It wasn't a medical condition. It was emotion, surfacing when the world was finally quiet enough to feel it. Gloria joined a mindfulness circle at the community center, where the facilitator asked a question that hit her like a chord played too close to the heart. When was the last time you truly listened to what your heart was whispering? And that night at 3 a.m., she knew. She wasn't being woken by biology. She was being invited to listen inward. So she did something simple. She placed a small notebook beside her bed. And when she woke, instead of turning on the TV or sighing in frustration, she wrote. Sometimes a sentence. Sometimes a single word. Lonely. Missing him. I still want to learn to paint. Not because she expected sleep to return, but because she gave herself permission to feel. Over time, those midnight pages became gentle company. Sometimes they helped her fall back asleep. Sometimes they didn't. But every time, they gave her a sense of peace, a sense of truth-telling. Because sometimes the deepest rest doesn't come from sleep. It comes from being heard, even by yourself. Gloria's story reveals something many of us experience but never speak aloud. At 3 a.m., when the house is still and the past feels close, our minds begin to open old drawers. Moments we thought we'd forgotten, questions we thought we'd buried, and longings we never gave voice to. These are not signs of decline. They are signs of depth, proof that your story is still unfolding, still rich with feeling. And maybe, just maybe, that soft ache at 3 a.m. is not a flaw, but a call, a chance to sit quietly with yourself and say, I hear you. And in that hearing, healing begins. Conclusion: what 3 a.m. might truly mean. If you've stayed with me this far, then maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've opened your eyes at 3 a.m., wondering what on earth your body is doing, wondering if it's a sign of something bad, something broken, something slipping quietly out of your control. But now, perhaps you see things differently. Waking up at 3 a.m. isn't always something to fix. Sometimes it's something to understand. You've heard the stories. Linda, who learned her melatonin, was simply fading, not failing. Frank, whose inner clock had shifted gently forward, like the seasons do. Marjorie, who discovered that her body was whispering through minor aches and bathroom signals. Samuel, who found that his quiet evenings were quietly telling his brain, it's time for bed. And Gloria, who realized that her heart, not her hormones, was the reason her eyes opened before dawn. These are not isolated cases. They are gentle echoes of what so many older adults experience. Not deterioration, but transformation. Not confusion, but communication. You are not malfunctioning. You are adapting. You are evolving into someone more attuned, more reflective, more human than ever. So the next time your eyes flutter open at 3 a.m., take a moment, place a hand over your heart, and ask softly, what do I need right now? Maybe it's a darker room. Maybe it's a gentler routine. Maybe it's just a grace to feel something real in the quiet hours before the sun. Because these moments, strange as it may seem, are not stealing your rest. They might just be giving you something deeper, a chance to reconnect with your rhythm, to listen inward, to choose tenderness over frustration. And that, dear friend, is a kind of rest in itself. If any part of this resonated with you, if you saw yourself in any of these stories, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below and tell me what your 3 a.m. moments have meant to you. And if this video offered you even a small sense of peace or perspective, please take a moment to like it, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss what comes next. Because we're not just talking about sleep here. We're talking about how to live well, gently, wisely, and with deep compassion for the stage of life you're in. Thanks for being here with me today. Until next time, I hope your nights are calm, your mornings are kind, and your heart is always heard, even at 3 a.m.